I collected some data from the State Bank of Pakistan, International Trade Center, World Bank, and the National Bureau of Statistics. And with the help of those data, I would like to give you probably a different picture from what you generally have as a narrative when it comes to the opportunities for Pakistan and the external trade of Pakistan, in particular in relation to China and the European Union. So we've often heard that the trade with China and the trade partner with China is, Pakistan's biggest trade buddy is China. I heard it yesterday by politicians and whatnot. So let's see with numbers how serious the statement is. So Pakistan has started stronger trade relations with China essentially since the free trade agreement, which is late 2016 but entered into force in July 2007. Yeah, so 2006 and 2007. So 11 years, not even 11 years, right? That's what we can count as a more serious trade relationship with China. And the second phase of that, this was a multi-phase free trade agreement. The second phase, negotiations started in 2013. And I believe they're not concluded yet. So the past 5 years, we've been trying to agree on the next phase. And once again, if you have a good trade body, it doesn't take long to agree on various aspects. In relation to China, in the past 5 years, the country did not manage to agree on certain things, and I will point out why. With the EU, you've had a trade relations for at least stronger trade relations, if you see the data, since 2002. So 5 more years of more serious trade relations. And then you have a GSP plus status, which is the second level of preferential trade agreements with developing countries. In particular, it concerns vulnerable economies, low and mid-income economies. You have that since 2014. All the data that you can see since 2014 show you that, what we've discussed before, that trade with the EU almost exponentially increased. So you really are taking advantage of, to a certain extent, and to certain product schemes, of the possibility to import to the EU without tariffs and quotas. So this is very important. And then if we look at what you export to China, is really interesting to see, because I've heard several times since I've been to Islamabad and in general in Pakistan, that Pakistan is a water-sensitive country. Okay, there's a lot of there's great scarcity of when it comes to the resource of water. Now, what do you think you import to China most? Cotton and rice. Most water-sensitive agricultural products. So there's a great mismatch between the natural capabilities and what the Pakistan agro industry is doing, and what goes of that production, what goes to China. And of course, I don't need to mention, but when it comes to cotton and rice, you're competing with a great deal of Southeast Asian countries, Thailand in particular for rice, etc., etc. So that's also very important and almost funky to see how these trade patterns develop. Then what you import, so this is a positive sign, what you import from China is machinery. And I've come across several opinions that the lower cost machinery that you import, electric equipment that you import from China, actually could help the local, in particular SME, small and medium-sized companies sector, especially in textile and in the cement industry. So Pakistan, that also exports, and I will come back to that later, and it's a growing number well, not only number, but quantities. Export material is electric equipment, certain fine machinery. that you import from China too. So there is a mismatch once again in between what you sell towards Europe and what you get from China. But it could be regarded as a positive sign of trade relations with, or a positive aspect of being a trade partner with China. Also, another positive thing that you get cheap raw material, which could help resolving your supply chain problems in Pakistan, in particular in the manufacturing, yarn for textile, fertilizers, machinery in the agri sector. And finally, when I come to the CPEC, the CPEC will benefit certain cities, certain regions. As a whole, it will not benefit Pakistan. That's a misconception. That's an economic corridor, and the effect of that economic corridor, let's say, is the 20 miles on both sides of the corridor where industrial parks, resorts, housing will be built for those who are involved in a CPEC. But it has nothing to do with, it will not have a direct effect on cities further than 20, 30, 40 kilometers from the corridor itself, or the main joints, let's see, for example, in Galdar or the Karachi or the big cities that are anyway important cities. So it's a misconception that it will benefit everybody in Pakistan, okay? Now, some negative effects I would like to emphasize. These are many more in numbers when it comes to the trade relation with China vis-a-vis the trade relations with the European Union. So first of all, the free trade agreement that you have with China, it only concerns goods. It does not concern services. So your IT industry is completely out of the picture, where you have great cost advantages and where you could provide services without having to move. Okay, that's not covered. Now the FTA with China, which is often applauded as a great achievement, again, covers only goods. Pakistan's GDP, 55% of that is services. Okay? 25% is from the agriculture industry and 9% from industry. So you have actually a free trade agreement that doesn't even cover half of your national production. I think that's often overlooked, but that's, just, it's a good thing to keep in mind. China is number 3 when it comes to exports for Pakistan, covering 7.7%. The EU is number 1, covering 20%. You're right next door, and you're hardly exporting anything. Exaggerating a little bit, okay? So 7.7% versus 20% with the EU already, and growing. But China is number 1 when it comes to imports. You import 30% of your total import from China. So once again, who's benefiting mostly from this trade relations? Okay? You're more and more dependent on Chinese imports. How detrimental that is to your own manufacturing industries, I'll come to that later. The EU is number 2 when it comes to imports. But the overall largest trading partner of Pakistan is not China, it's the EU, when you look at it as a whole. So not Germany and France and the UK, but the EU as an economic bloc. It is currently the largest trading partner. Main import items. Electrical machinery, iron items, well, that's not that important. But under this FTA, 15% of traded goods are not given tariff concessions. 15%. Now, what is this 15% covering? Plastic, cotton, paper, textile items. All value-added products. So products where people in Pakistan could add value that is good for the economy, where everyone's better off, are not included. You can't sell that. You can sell raw material. You can sell certain type of cotton. This is worked cotton, so not primary products. You can sell primary products that you spend a lot of money on because you don't have the water scheme that you would need to produce cotton and rice, but you do it anyway. That you can sell to China. But once you add local value to it, you can sell that too, but you don't have a tariff concession on that. So you're not competing at equal foot. Now, one of the largest imports of China that is sending to Pakistan is textile. Well, Pakistan has a huge textile industry. Is this not strange? Where is the added value? You get lower value, cheaper products, you dump on your market. What happens with the products that your local industry produces? Now, there's a price difference between the two, and that will dampen the price of your own products, which means that people will earn less. So their purchasing power will become less, etc., etc. It's a domino effect. Again, export is not diversified towards China. I talked about that. Another interesting thing I found that certain products, dried fruits, milled rice, footwear, all products where there is a manufacturing process. So it's, once again, milled rice. It's not rice just that you collect. It's processed products, processed rice. Certain footwear, steel, wood on the top, so handicrafts work. Dried fruits, not just fruit that you collect and ship in containers. You have to work on it. Dried fruits. They still have very high tariffs. It's not that they are not tariff, that they don't have a tariff concession. They have very high tariffs. On dried fruits, you have 25% ad valorem tax. Get into China, 1/4 of the price up. And then you can start selling. Milled rice, 65%. 2/3 of the price is added just because you crossed the border under the FTA. So footwear, 24%. These are very, very high tariffs that you still have. Also, the cheap consumer goods that are coming from China, pig iron, sewing machine, metal drums, they hurt the local industry because you all produce these. There was in the paper of the State Bank of Pakistan, I found a very recent study, end of 2017. There was a table in that paper that compared these kind of products, pig iron, metal drums, etc., of which you have a production in Pakistan, how much the local production decreased since 2006, I believe. There are product categories where you have no measurable local production anymore because of China's imports. Again, I'm not making that. I'm not making that that comparison. This was in an official paper. So I think it's very important to keep in mind. And probably the least known effect of the FTA and the great relationship with China as a trading partner, and I'm not being ironic, is that China has provided Pakistan zero duty on 35% of the total tariff lines. Sounds good, right? Now, China, under the ACFTA, so the Asian and China Free Trade Agreements, countries within the Asian, ASEAN, if you wish, economic zone, and China, they also have zero duty on certain tariff lines. As opposed to Pakistan and China, 35%, they have on 90%. So China, with the ASEAN countries free trade agreement, has provided 90% of 90% of the products, zero tariffs. Pakistan, only 35%. So put that free trade agreement into context and then start evaluating how good buddies you really are. Again, the trade balance is extremely in favor of China, so very negative for Pakistan. You import a great deal more than what you export to China. I believe that there are, to some extent, it's the fault of the non-innovative Pakistani businesses. But to a great extent, you just can't really do more because the FTA limits you. You cannot have 90% zero tariffs if in the FTA it's only 35. Right? So the regulatory framework is not there for it. It's overhyped. Now, when it comes to the EU, I'm not going to repeat many things that I've already said in other meetings, but yes, the EU's economic growth is relatively modest, 2.4% compared to China, that of China. But again, put this into context. China is an emerging economy. The European Union, the West in general, they've had developed economies. The income from manufacturing and from services has saturated at a much, much higher level, much healthier level than most of the developing countries. China is no exception. They jump certain economic phases, which of course does not help to stabilize a healthy society. Because it's not only about economy. Of course, in China you have the super rich, but you have the super poor as well. And in a 1.34567, who knows, billion country, this is an issue, right? I've seen in the Philippines, I asked them how many there are, state subjects, how many Philippines there are. They said, well, somewhere between 100 and 125 million. Between. So they have no idea about 25 million people. And that's the Philippines. Pakistan is the estimate of 2017 is somewhere between 200 and 210 million people. So you have a margin of 10 million people that might be there, might not be there, but that's 10 million people. And again, in meetings, I was told that Pakistan is welcoming all the refugees and how great the country is. While in Europe, one of the largest number of refugees, illegal, not refugees, migrants, mostly illegal, is Pakistani. So if it was so great, why people bother to go as far as the EU? Once again, it's the question of context, how you put the data, and I believe it's often mesmerized and overshaded or over applauded. It's the picture is not so good. So yes, the EU is modestly growing, 2.4%, but it's the best since the economic and financial crisis of 2008 and 7, 8, and 9. The exports and the direct investment is increasing in the European Union, signs of a healthy economy. Local private consumption is stable. Inflation is relatively low, but more importantly, it's stable. It's not only low, around 1.6, 1.7%, it's stable. So certainty is there, which is very important for businesses. Yes, in the EU, we need to further diversify the economy. That's a fact. We do need more investment, which are more efficient, which increase productivity. We need to fight off protectionism, which is a general phenomenon in the world today. And we need to combat the issue of Brexit, which brings along a lot of uncertainty, in particular for companies that are based off of the UK. Other issues in the EU, let's not forget about the EU-US relation, how that is going to develop. The EU and the US are still the two strongest economies in the world. I don't believe that the West is completely failing. I know it's a buzzword and it's cool to say, and in particular in this part of the world, it's cute. It's, you know, I sympathize with that, because it would be much better if this was the center of the world. When it comes to population, it is. But these are very fragile economies, including the Chinese. I've been to China several times, and each and every time I have at least one discussion, very low voice discussion, that, well, you know, our banks, they might be on the verge of, and then people don't like to continue that. It's so the Chinese economy is very much driven by a central economic planning. But what if that changes? What if leadership changes? That economic planning might be changing. So it's not, the economy is not a, it's not a market economy in a Western sense. It's a social market economy. It's a Chinese socialism. For many things, it could work much better than generally Western liberal market economies. Again, there's a great deal of discussion about this. So, okay, let's just talk a little bit about the EU's global presence vis-à-vis Pakistan. The EU GDP, even more so than Pakistan, is service dependent. 70% of the EU GDP comes from services. If you remember, in Pakistan it was 55%. But in the EU there is 25% of industry. In Pakistan's case, it's only 9%. So there's a great difference between that. And only 2% of agriculture. Pakistan still has 25% of its GDP from agriculture, but it employs 45% of the workforce. So produces much less than it employs. That's also an important point. Now, we do know that the EU is Pakistan's largest trading partner under the GSP Plus system. And in spite of the fact that Pakistan's trade balance is negative, with the EU it's positive. So it exports much more to the EU than than what it imports from the EU. So again, the EU has negative trade balance with Pakistan according to 2017 EC data. 66.89 million import versus 61.49 million as in export. So there's almost a 10% gap between imports and export. And since 2010, it has always been negative. So that's important. 25% of Pakistani FDI is coming from the EU. This is very important for you. So 1/4 of your foreign direct investment is EU origin. Okay? But whilst the EU is Pakistan's #1 trading partner when it comes to the sum of imports and exports, Pakistan is only number 42 for the EU. So there is a long road which you can climb. The EU's import from Pakistan has a growth rate. Again, something that is bigger than the export from the EU's perspective. So the EU's import from Pakistan has a growth rate for the period of 2013-2017 of over 10%. So the spread of 4 years, growth rate over 10%. Only in 2015, the first year of the GSP Plus status, you increased 20% in 1 year. So once again, the products that you don't have the purchasing power in Pakistan, they find their way into the EU fine, and it's growing. So there's also a demand for it. And also, again, when it comes to China, there's a great difference between demand and necessity. Demand is something that actually people can pay for. Necessity is more incentivized by external factors, and it's hardly ever sustainable. Now, from the EU's perspective, why it's also a positive relationship, because the exports are growing. The EU export to Pakistan is generally services. Last year, around 15%. So the EU is starting to come to Pakistan. In my opinion, not yet at the rate and the level which I would love to, but technical assistance, management consulting, business consulting starts to find its way to Pakistan, which is the general services, are the general services from developed countries to developing countries. And I think it's a good sign because you need capacity building, you don't only need money, and I've been quoted in several sources that I have mentioned that in Pakistan you don't need trade policies, you need to fix the implementation part. I did not say that, but put that into context, you do need to work on the implementation of policies because that's the most important. If you get money and you don't know what to do with it, that's money wasted. Same thing when it comes to equipment. If you don't know how to use the equipment, you pay for equipment and it just go to rust. So you do need capacity, mainly because of the lack of internal education. And we've discussed it at the beginning that there's a high rate of, if not illiteracy, but people who skip out of school. You cannot have a healthy society without a basic education given to people. And of course, the higher educated the people are, the better it is for the economy, the society, and also politics. This is, once again, a domino effect. Now, finally, I would like to mention two things. First, there are areas which are really growing when it comes to Pakistani exports to the European Union. These are electronic components, automotive products, pharmaceuticals, and minerals. Electronic components, something that you, to a great deal, also import from China. But your export of electronic components to the EU is growing. So I think this has to be mashed together because you're wasting a lot of money on getting that from abroad just because it's cheaper instead of giving rather value to your local production or streamlining local production and perhaps making it more efficient. In order to be more efficient, as we just discussed, capacity building is needed. The easier solution is to get it from abroad, and once it's done, not fix it, throw it out, and get again from a cheaper place. But it does not give you added value. It's not sustainable in the long run. So these are the industries that I would focus more on. I would also, if I was asked, I would tell the policymakers to, first of all, boost export policy towards the EU, thereby diversifying what you export to the EU. Don't let it slip away because you like the buzzword of CPEC. But in order to do that, there is another buzzword that I will use, the Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution. He can also come in. The fourth industrial revolution, which is required for your manufacturing industry to adapt to new challenges. A great deal of that industry is a danger because many processes will be automated, robotics will take over, artificial intelligence, etc., etc. But this doesn't mean that everyone will be out of job. But you do need a vocational training policy. If you don't have that, everyone will be out of job. And you will buy the products from abroad. I don't know from what, but you will have to buy it from abroad because it's going to be cheaper. Plus, you won't have a local production. So this is sort of an Armageddon, but it comes. In developing countries, Industry 4.0, fourth industrial revolution is extremely dangerous. But Pakistan has a relatively well-known, high added value IT sector. But you do have to create a value in that. You do have to make that competitive with European companies. That is, applying European regulatory standards. Not only when you want to sell to Europe in advance. You know, there are certain regulatory trends, in particular data privacy, that is originating in Europe and taking over the world. Taking over not in an aggressive way, but as China exports its economic policy through the economic corridors, while EU exports its data protection policy through various international accords. What do you need to do when it comes to direct actions? I believe that Pakistan has a very bad public image in the European Union. Essentially, your supporters are from the UK for diaspora-related reasons. You have a great Pakistani community there. But the UK is leaving the European Union, at least temporarily. So you should really think about who your buddies will be within the European Union. At business-to-business level, at people-to-people, and at political level. That's one thing. Second, I recommend that you start developing positive presence in Brussels in a comprehensive, consecutive, and smart way. There are other countries from the region, without naming them, who are doing this in a very professional way. Very subtle, very professional. Pakistan is not doing it. You need to start appearing as think tanks, partner to local projects in Europe, companies that create brand. We were just talking about it, that there is no international Pakistani company, like no international brand from Pakistan that is known to be a Pakistani brand. You should start creating one. But it's not going to come overnight. So if you're not happy, if you're not determined enough, forget it. That's not going to work. The European Union is different from China. But it's more long-term. It has been always more long-term. So that's another thing. There are people in Brussels who are in the European Parliament who can embrace your ideas, individual ideas, who are members of the European Parliament from the UK with Pakistani origin. And if you move fast through their channels, you might create new supporters of your ideas in the European Parliament. And that's what you have to focus on, I believe. You can start doing that in the member states, but the member states are so dispersed. But when you look at the EU, you're looking at a market of 460 million people with great purchasing power, much greater than this part of the world. To give you an example, Germany's GDP per capita is 10 times yours, which is also a signal of purchasing power. Nominal or relative terms doesn't really matter from this point of view. So that's also something. But it's not going to come free. So Pakistan does have an obligation of 27 international human rights conventions to be implemented in the country, and is due to report on most of them. And the report is not yet there. Now, the GSP Plus status was confirmed very recently, this year, but it was much pushed for by UK MEPs of Pakistani origin. I'm not sure that in 2 years it will be that easy, because you really have no further allies at the moment. So that's something to be built on. There's the new 5-year engagement plan. The first one was running 2012-2017 with the EU, which is right now being negotiated. I would say that pay close attention to that and try to influence that. Be a voice. And then that could be even more particular to tailored to your needs. So, and with that, I would also like to conclude. Perhaps one more thing. Brexit is an issue for Pakistan because you do import a lot to the UK, and some of that goes to the European Union from the UK. Now, once the UK is going to be out of the customs union and the single market, you will have to jump a border, and that will not be tariff-free. So whatever your deal with the United Kingdom will be, that will not apply to the European Union. So the GSP Plus scheme will be even more important, okay, than going through the UK channel, which of course means that you need to explore new channels, new trading channels, because sometimes it will be probably more wise to directly send certain goods onto the continent as opposed to sending it to the UK and then transferring. But that's at a particular product level, so then we would have to look into that.